Welcome to the Nano podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of nano-cap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of nano-cap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. In this episode, we have Kit Gray, the president of PodcastOne, stock ticker PODC. PodcastOne is the leading destination for the best and most popular podcasts across many top genres, from sports, comedy, celebrity culture, entertainment, news, and politics. Kit, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Will, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
So I was looking into your background, and I would love to hear a little bit more about just kind of what you were up to before PodcastOne, and then tell me a little bit more about meeting the legend Norm and how that kind of came to be with you two combining forces.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a fun story. My background, I grew up in Boston and actually went to college down in Florida and went to business school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was an analyst for a company called L3 Communications, which was really a military government contracted company, which, just if you know me, is pretty much the opposite of who I am. Structure like that, and everything was just a good learning experience in terms of like what I don't want to do in life. So I'm glad I got to check that off. And when I talk to people, I think, try everything, right? And learn everything. Those are all good things that helped me get to where I am now. But what I did is I moved to Chicago, bartended, and ran into a woman that ran Katz Media Group, which is a subsidiary of then Clear Channel, now iHeart, where they represented on a national scale radio stations. And the job was to go out to the media agencies and get RFPs, requests for proposals on media spend, and then represent the radio stations across the country to say, all right, well, in Austin or Boston, Mass, this is the media budget. I represent these radio stations, and let's put a plan together. So that was my intro to media. I moved to New York, lived there in my early 20s, then started, back up into Boston where I'm from. And then my old mentor, a good friend of mine, Tucker Flood, he was starting a new division of that company. And he said, well, how do you feel about Los Angeles? It was February. It was maybe 4 degrees out in Boston. And I was walking to work and I was sold. And,
I was going to ask that of how when you went back from Florida back to Boston, where you're like, okay, this is a ticking time bomb. I can't stay here much longer. I need some sort of sun. Or what was that like?
Well, it was good to be home with family for a little while, and I met some really great people when I was there. And actually, a guy named Nunzio Di Gregorio, who I'm still very, very close with, who runs Premier's office in New York for iHeart still. It's funny, he connected me to a guy you asked the original question about, Norm Pattis. So literally, you never know where things take you, right? I still am a guy that gets 45 degrees here this morning where I am in Florida, and it's freezing. So I don't like the cold. It's not my favorite thing. And, I like playing golf and being outside and stuff like that and going to the beach. So LA was awesome. I worked for the Katz Media out there and a new division with Tucker. They won Seller of the Year for iHeart in 2005 or something like that. And you could kind of see the writing on the wall that digital was starting to really take place, banners, video networks, of course, but the radio music industry with Pandora starting to evolve a little bit, streaming radio companies getting out there. I knew just based on my behavior, I'm a guy from Boston driving in Los Angeles and stuck in traffic, and K-Rock was playing the Red Hot Chili Peppers every other song. I can't listen to Laker talk. I hate the Lakers. So I basically was trying to find ways to see how, audio was going to evolve. And, you could see it with TiVo and the DVRs and how that was rolling, that on-demand audio is going to be something. So I long story short, I left iHeart to go work for a startup mobile company called Amped Mobile, which is another guy that I'm still around who started that company. And basically, they were the first company with the Razr phone to have content on it, if you guys remember that. You'd be able to watch NBA games, you'd be able to play video games, but you had to like text, with the numbers, and it was ahead of its time for sure. And it was really cool. It was a fun place to learn about CPMs, digital media, mobile budgets, how people are thinking differently about media. I actually then left that company as it went under, and went back to iHeart to run their digital side of things in the streaming world, and had some really good success there. Their company was evolving, and I knew I was evolving. I knew there was I had to go out to Horizon Media in Los Angeles and pitch them on radio station websites and digital properties. And that morning, I just had a calling basically, and I said, I can't do this. Like, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in radio. I don't believe in why anyone would ever go to a radio station website. I couldn't sell it anymore. And I think, for anybody in sales to be able to, you have to believe in what you're selling. And if you don't, you've got a problem. People can see right through it. And I knew that I needed something that was going to work. My now wife, we were just started dating. I decided to leave, and she worked for a private equity firm in Los Angeles, and she introduced me to a solar company. So I went out and did that for a little bit, understanding that that's the future. That would help people. I believed in it. But when I was doing that, and that was the hardest job I ever had, that knocking on somebody's door is the hardest thing you'll ever do as a salesperson, I believe. I wasn't great at it, but I learned a lot about myself. And when I was doing it, I started listening to podcasts, and this was like 2009. And Ricky Gervais, if you guys all know him, he's funniest guy in the world, I think. He did a thing with Paul, I think it was off the BBC, but it was on demand, and he did it with a guy over there, and it was the funniest thing I've ever heard. And at that time, you had to download it onto an iPod on your computer, drag it over, and in your car, you'd have to do like a tape player to some kind of MP3 machine that you had. You really needed to want that content. The content was unbelievable. I mean, unlike anything you've ever heard. And what I did believe in is audio and the theater of mind, the laughter, the creativity, just the conversation and the engagement. That's what I was sold on, right? And I knew if there was an audience to that, there'd be advertisers that would be interested in this. And in turn, you could create networks, just like Norm did for Westwood One some 40 years ago when he started the company. He put radio station groups together, created networks, and sold those to brands and content around it. He was ahead of his time, and I think I was too in that sense. So there's a guy named Adam Carolla who I still work with, every day. He is still, to me, one of the funniest guys in the entire world. He to those who don't know him, he worked on The Man Show with Jimmy Kimmel. He's been on The Family Guy for years. He was on Loveline with Dr. Drew. He still does that as a podcast. That was nationally syndicated on Westwood One. That was also on MTV. Adam was taking over for Howard Stern back in the time, and I was listening to him in LA a lot, and he got fired. They let him go at CBS, and he started a podcast. And so I started really getting into his show, and his show started building some momentum. I sent him an email just randomly and said, hey, I'm in the space. I know it. I know I can make you some money. Can we get together, or do you have somebody I can talk to? Next day, he reached out to me. I went out to his studio in Glendale, California, sat with him. He said, let's do it. And that's where it started. And, just the last real story on when I knew this was a business and an industry, there's a guy, again, I still work with. These are all great, great friends of mine now, who ran an agency called Ad Results in Houston, Texas. And, Marshall and Russell down there are amazing friends. And they had a relationship with a company called Provide Commerce, which did ProFlowers, Sherry's Berries. And, typically they'd buy, overnight radio, overnight TV, low CPMs, throw in type media, right? And use what they call the CPA, where basically if you use a code, you basically get, $15 for every order or something around those lines, right? I called Marshall, and I said, look, I think Adam could do a great job for you guys. Do you have any interest? And he's like, all right, well, what would it cost for a spot on Adam? And I'm like, well, he's got this many people. It's a really cheap, efficient CPM. How about $1,000? And I think he spit out his coffee and he's like, well, K-Rock morning drive is like $600. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But let's try and prove concept here. And he's like, all right, well, let me give you $15 and run ads for, February 2009, Valentine's Day, I think it was. And I got Adam to do it. And, after the campaign, they owed Adam, I think it was $38,000. So if you do the math there, that was pretty great. The client was ecstatic. They were really, really excited about doing more. They brought more clients to me. I went out and got more clients, like go to meeting with Citrix and, go to my PC. I had LegalZoom. Fox got involved because of Adam's relationship on the Family Guy. I knew a bunch of buyers there and media spenders there. So that's where that evolved. I then started reaching out to other podcasters. There's a guy, Bill Burr, Mark Maron, Chris Hardwick from The Nerdist, CBS News with 60 Minutes, and started creating a network. And it just started making great money and building a business. But I knew, eventually this is going to evolve into something, more that I needed to figure out how to control on a business side of things. So I was doing everything, accounting, collections, sales, all of it. And it was fun. I learned everything. And then I met Norm. And Norm, through my friend Nunzio and this guy Eric Weiss that used to be his legal counsel, they introduced me to Norm. Norm knew Adam, obviously, from Loveline and in those days. And we created a partnership. He saw exactly what I was doing based on what he did at the time. He was not ready to retire or do anything like that. And the people that remember Norm's not really a retired type guy. So he and I partnered up. He put a bunch of money into it, and we started building a company and starting podcasts like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Lady Gang, Caitlin Bristow, really understanding that a lot of the advertisers wanted metrics. So we had to work with a company called Edison Research to figure out who's listening, what's a download, is it an impression? And the business really kind of evolved from there.
Going to take a step back for a second. As
Sure.
You mentioned, you were salesperson of the year at iHeartRadio. And just real quickly, was that just due to just you working harder than everyone else? Was it a combination of that plus luck? Did you see where the puck was going, so skated there? Or because it seems like the combination of you just willing to reach out to people cold, and then also you seeing the future is kind of what led you to PodcastOne. Would you say that's kind of a synopsis?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it comes back to who I've always been. I'm was never really the smartest guy out there. I was always the hardest worker, willing to take chances and really, I wanted to win. I'm extremely competitive. But I've always felt like I'm a good guy, and I think like that people would always take meetings with me because I treated them with respect. I did what I said I was going to do. And, that's just who I was. And I think for me, that served me really well. And so I was able to kind of just work off of that. My parents, to give them credit, they're both extremely hardworking people. My dad owns his own construction company in Boston, and my mom was a teacher, and they gave everything in their lives for me and my brother. And I learned so much from that too, right? So like, I just knew to be different and to be better, I had to go above and beyond. I always asked questions, looked at who's the best and cozied up to them and said, how do I do that? How do I be better at this? So, that still doesn't change. I'm still the same guy when I look at other podcasting companies out there or other tech companies out there. All right, what are they doing? Are they doing it better than us? Can we do it better than them? What's the next step down the road? And we're fortunate at PodcastOne because we're not a huge company where we can't pivot and move fast on different directions. That's, it's just kind of always served me well.
No, and you being a normal person with no malice or no different things that you're thinking about behind people's back was probably a huge breath of fresh air for Adam when he's been meeting all these LA people his whole life. He probably got a kick out of meeting you and how normal you were right off the bat. Tell me a bit about Adam's podcast in the very beginning and him getting sued by patent trolls because they said they had patented sequencing things in numerical order, I think it was, online, and how basically now Adam is on the Mount Rushmore of podcasts for saving the entire industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about his legal fund and how that all went down?
My God, I haven't heard about that in a long time. I kind of like blacked it out. That's funny. It is, that was a scary time because, I had this, like, I knew podcasting was it. I mean, and it is like, you look at it right now and how much it changed, like, the political landscape and, you and I sitting here doing this podcast together, like, it opens up conversations that never would have been heard without, this technology, this medium. And I just knew. I was like, this is the best media there is. One, to consume. Two, if I'm an advertising company, this is what I would advertise on, right? So, like, I just knew, in my heart. But when that patent troll stuff happened, I just remember being with Adam and being like, just saying exactly what we were just saying right there, right? Like, this is it. This is the best of what audio is. This is the best of what comedy and communication, and this is it. And that these, assholes that are patent trolls, in Texas get away with this bullshit is amazing. I had never heard and never knew what a patent troll was. And, like, look, people make money in different ways, right? And now that I'm running a publicly traded company, lawyers and all this stuff, what a mess it can be. At that time, Adam had this network, and really what companies, now that you look back on it, corporations, even us, with some recent things that have happened, you have to respect the talent in their communities and how powerful they are. The bigger they are, the more powerful they are. You look at just the impact that Joe Rogan had on the political elections this past year. But when you have a community like that, you have power, you have influence. And
to your point there, was that a huge selling point to advertisers moving forward that, like, hey, our people mobilize? These aren't just like generic people driving to work and just kind of flick this on because that's what the car started playing right away. This is something that's intentional listening, and that he actually has a community that will, like, save his podcast if there's an existential risk. Is that something that, like, you were able to be like, no, our CPM is actually, like, worth its weight in gold?
Absolutely, right? So what happens is the ROI is actually measurable, right? So if you do a spot on K-Rock, you really have no idea if it worked or anybody heard it, or is it in the fifth, minute of a commercial break. With podcasting, I mean, especially now with attribution and all this great technology that's behind it, you really have all the beautiful things that digital had, right? Like if you bought a YouTube campaign or a video display campaign, you knew the click-through rates, the attribution, the sell points through your e-commerce sites, all of that. So what podcasting brought to it was exactly that, right? So I had ROI metrics, I had power. And I'll tell a quick funny story. Bill Burr, Stamps.com, did a campaign with him, and they're great people at Stamps.com, and they're still there. And when Bill did the first read on his Monday morning podcast, he trashed the company. I mean, it was Bill Burr style. He's one of the funniest men in the world, but he's also an angry comedian from Boston, and he went after it. Why would anyone use this? Blah, blah, blah. And when I heard it, my heart sank, and the agency got pretty upset about it. Later that day, they called me back, and I was figuring I would get even more of a wrath. And Bill's not the kind of guy I can call and say, hey, you got to take that out of your podcast. He would never do that. Like, that's just not happening. So I figured that's where we were going. And then the head of the stamps.com account was on with the agency, and it was their best sales day they ever had. So they no longer cared. They just didn't care. And they wanted us to kind of tone it down, but based on the amount of money they made that day from that spot, they didn't care. And so that was pretty cool. That kind of like, that's the type of power that these communities have. So with Adam, back to the patent troll, he did a GoFundMe and basically explained to his fan base, what's going on, and these people are going to try and stop podcasting. And, when you start listening to podcasts, it becomes part of your life. You start looking into other podcasts, and the research is behind it. I mean, people spend 8, 10, 15 hours a week listening to podcasts, and, they're introduced to new ones, and they try them, and they look at different interviews, and they evolve, and people were not going to take it. And so Adam was able to raise a bunch of money to fund his legal team, and we fought those guys, and we won. And I look at that experience. I look at, even the Cast Media experience that we went through last year, acquiring some assets. What you need to understand about podcasting is, and companies and corporations, sometimes deals don't work out and they fold, and, things happen. But you can't do that with podcasters and communities like that. That it's not a corporation. It's talent. There's emotion involved. So they can mobilize their troops and create change, and just nothing more powerful than what Joe Rogan did, and all the other podcasts that had President-elect Trump on, and even for Kamala, they were able to mobilize and create change, and they did. And that's the power of, man, I can go on a political rant and I won't, but that's what we are at America. This is what the United States is based off of, is communication and talking and understanding other people's point of view. And Elon Musk said it perfectly on Rogan's podcast. You really can't hide on a 2-hour conversation who you are, and you never got that before. You never got a chance to learn about these people on a deep level. No one's ever heard my story like this, right? So it's just a special medium. We believe in it. And, back to like selling, like you can hear it in my voice. I just believe in it so much. And when you go into an ad agency or a client and say, hey, you should spend your money on this, it's because I believe it and I know it. And that's the cool thing about it.
No, I'm with you 100%. I'm obviously 100% a believer in the podcast medium, and just having not only a guest that the listener cares about, but then listening for sometimes hours on end is some sort of almost like voodoo that you can't do with people's attention spans nowadays anywhere but podcasts. And so, no, it's very interesting. Back to the Bill Burr thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. He also had the like off the rails Sherry's Berries ad read.
Oh yeah, I brought that one to him too. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, sending him the berries. Oh man, that learning, comedians are on their own. Their own level of like, they're amazing, so talented, but they are so. There's insecurities. They are artists, man. And if I were to give Norm any, what I learned most from Norm Pattis is, talent management is a skill that not many people have or understand. People that think they have it, they don't, because no one really has it to a level. You got to be special. I know I'm really good at it. Doesn't mean I can do it all the time and manage a certain talent, but I'll tell you, like, I learned so much from Norm on talent management, and it really, all it is treating them the same way they treat you. You don't look at them like they're stars or big in any way. You look at them on a equal playing field, and again, you come through with what you say you're going to do. But man, oh man, I remember sending those Sherry Sperry's to Bill's house, and him not getting them the right ones, or some of them weren't good. And God, his comments on the podcast were, you're just like, I can't. Monday
It's worth
morning was
YouTubing
really
for
something.
sure.
God, man, he is. I mean, he's so funny and he's so angry and he's so, direct. But man, those were the days I'd listen to that Monday morning podcast, and I loved the show. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world, but I was on high edge every time that thing would go out. And it was something.
So you kind of mentioned it there. Where do you see yourself as a business? Because you are partially a talent manager, getting ad rates and such. You are a podcast network, but at the same time, you're kind of an agency. And so, how do you kind of balance all that? Is it more of a network because they all use each other's kind of audiences and kind of bounce off each other to advertise and promote the next one? Or like, how do you kind of describe the ecosystem that you manage?
Yeah, it's a fun company. When I first started it, it was a rep firm, just like
Yep.
Katz Media was. Right? I'll represent these radio stations. In turn, I'll represent these podcasts. I'll take a commission, and let's rock and roll. And that's a very simple, good business as long as you don't run it into the ground with lowering your commissions rates. And that's what iHeart did, and why part of the reason why iHeart's in such a bad spot. But for us, that's a simple business. So we still do that a lot. But what makes us different and why we don't get those, we don't do, 80-20 rep deals, or even 80, 75-25, none of that. We don't. And the reason we command a higher rep firm commission rate is because I believe we do, right? We have the best sales team across the country, 12 plus people. We have the ability to market shows, use our production facilities to take some of the weight off of talent so they can do more content, what they're great at, and we can kind of evolve the business around them, get higher CPMs, monetize backlog, catalogs, share of voice episodes, include social. We are much more than just a spots and dots company. We're tied to programmatic people, and desks down that front, sales relationships to go out as a network. So we're not just a rep firm. And that started evolving into us launching our own shows. Anything from Stone Cold Steve Austin, working with A&E to do all the production for their shows, launching new shows like I think we launched 48 last calendar year, that we have IP in. There's Farnham Town, which is a scripted show, which we just sold to Paramount. We've got, more of those in the hopper. So we're not just a rep firm. We are a production house, that owns IP. We have the ability to do other ancillary things like live shows, merch, live, pay content type stuff, subscription models. We do video now. We have a studio in Beverly Hills. So we look at ourselves as, really a full service podcasting company to again take on, the weight of doing these podcasts, the editing, and all the hard work that goes into it, the marketing, the production side of things, the distribution, the scheduling, the ad sales, the collections, the accounting, all of it, right? The legal. And there's more to it than just being a rep firm. So we are that company. Now, we're not the company that's going to go out and sign Joe Rogan to a $300 million deal. That will never noodle out for a company like us. We make deals that are profitable deals just based on our nature. We run a smart business. I'm an analyst at heart. So I sit there and I look at downloads. I look at sellout rates. I look at where shows are. Can we do better? Can we make more content for them? Can we get more out of it? And when we make new deals to represent or acquire a podcast, we hedge our bets just like an analyst would. So, that's our business model. And we maybe don't grow as fast as we should, although we are. We need to, make the right decisions. I run the business just like I did when I was, out of my garage, 15 years ago, where I want to make money, and that's our goal.
So to your point about like the Joe Rogan exit and like Call Her Daddy's exit to Spotify, do you see any of your portfolio almost as like a venture capital portfolio of like, okay, we take small bets on some of these people and some of them might really take off and other ones might not take off, but it's the top 20% that's always gonna bring home the majority of the money, and we got to keep casting our rod out there to see if there's bigger fish. Is that kind of how you see it, or do you go, okay, no, we have more of a kind of a boutique agency where we can only spend so much energy on each client, and so we got to make sure that they're profitable day one before we sign them on?
I think it's both. I think we run the day-to-day business how you just said it, right? Like, these are our core 25, 30, 50 shows, right? These are what make most of our revenue. We find ways to grow those shows on an annualized basis and really a monthly basis. Really work with the shows on how to get more content, how to do bigger, better deals. Is it going in the right direction? We do a lot of that. Now we have a talent acquisition team that I'm glad to say I'm not involved in it that much. I mean, I oversee it, but I now know I'm 48 years old. I have 3 kids. I live in Florida. I'm no longer what's cool and hip. And so we have a team of people that are in their 20s and early 30s that, understand what's going on in the world socially now and are tied into all the major talent agencies. We know what the trends are out there, what people are loving and where the engagement is and, who could possibly do a podcast. And then we go out and we try and get those people, right? And, we've had some real success. There's a show called I've Had It. They're now with us for our third year now. We just signed them to a nice extension. But when we took them on, they had about 20,000 downloads an episode. One is a divorce attorney and the other runs a really successful design company in Oklahoma. Very, very smart women. They love the space. And when they came to us with that audience, we have a really strong female network, and that was by design for advertisers. That's what they wanted. So we knew we could build this if we could introduce them to our huge network of female podcast listeners. And they were also really motivated to make it work. They still are very passionate about it. So within a year, we got that show over 120,000 downloads. We have 3 episodes a week. They're on the Today Show. They launched a political show. They're very passionate about politics. And, that's a 7-figure deal for us and for them. And so when, we're always casting out there, what's hot, let's try it. The beauty of podcasting is that, if it doesn't work, it's okay. And it's not like I spent, $100 million on a movie. And that's why, Wondery and the IP thing is so exciting too, because you get proof of concept like Varnamtown, which is, a cool story about Pablo Escobar infiltrating a town in North Carolina, which is a true story that no one ever would have heard of if it weren't for, I guess books or podcasts, right? And we did a deal with Epic to go tell this story. And, it's a fractional cost besides, doing a pilot for TV. And they now know there was a fan base for this. There was a hit. So, they got better odds of making a hit out of a TV show or a movie or a Netflix deal or whatever it might be based on that. So, that's kind of what we do now. We've got a bunch of really cool stories that we're going to do production on. We've got 2 more new shows with them. Ancient Aliens is one of them, which are hit TV shows that are now going into podcasting because they see how much money can be in it. It's super fun. We really have a good time and, launch shows. Not all of them work, of course, but, we find the ones that, we always say, if we like your podcast project more than you, we're in trouble, right? Yep. So, you gotta want to do it. The first 5 episodes are easy. You have your friends on, have a conversation, but what are you going to do in episode 28, 30, 90, right? Like, you've been doing it a long time. You really got to have passion for it, just like anything in life, right? So we as a company, we look for those people in the middle area that have a good audience. How can we grow their audience, put them into our world, and then, make them more money and really where everybody wins.
Awesome. So as we wrap up here, one thing that's always kind of bothered me about the podcast industry is just how inefficient it seems the marketing can be sometimes. As you mentioned earlier, with the idea of like forcing someone to remember a coupon code, click out of the podcast app, go to the website, shop, click in their address, add to cart, all that. So first and foremost, it seems Spotify is actually trying to change things up a bit. How has like Spotify changed your business with them adding new features to the podcast industry? And then like second off, how much do you just wish every single day that the podcast apps would just come up with like a push notification that you could use with the tracking?
Yeah, that would be nice, right? This is the challenge of podcasting has always been, people have their own ways of listening, right? So like I, traditionalist, I still get my podcast on Apple Podcasts, right? And, it's still, that's not the number one source anymore. YouTube, not shockingly, right, has taken over. It's, Google is so powerful as a search engine. YouTube is the number 2 search engine, also owned by Google. It made sense, right? And there's so much power there. In discovery, there's all the, YouTube's smart. Google's very bright. They're not going to give up, their business on the YouTube model for podcast consumption. And so when you look at these podcasts going on, it's really hard to control AdSense. And the shows do, or the personalities do, which is by design great, right? Great for YouTube, great for the shows. But if you're a network of like we are, where we want to be able to go out and sell impressions, to brands because we get it. And I know I can, take, Kelty Knight and our female network and run them on 20 YouTube shows that we control the spot. You can't do that. It's almost impossible to kind of control that. So it's always been kind of fragmented, right? And it's never been perfect. And you might listen on Castbox. Well, they won't do the push notification. So it's hard. So, and by design, it's kind of nice too, because if it was so automated, you wouldn't need, companies like us in a way, right? So, or at least it helps us have some leverage, right? And knowing that we need to control all that in some way to get more money into it, right? So, I don't know if that's ever going to change because technology is going to change with it and it's so fast and people's consumption habits are going to change. The cool thing is there's a lot of really good companies.
Is it partially because of just the RSS feed format that everyone's just going to use that forever and so no one will ever have like full control?
Yeah, right. Norm and I used to debate this over coffee a lot. We would sit there and he would say, I don't understand why we're putting all our content on all these different platforms. iHeart, Spotify, they're competitors of ours. And he's not wrong. That's the old model. But in the internet, you can consume it anywhere. And if you're not going to get the audience and the critical mass that you need. With the RSS feed, you still control the content of the show, the ad distribution, the markers, all of that. So you gotta kind of be comfortable with that. That was really hard for him to ever really kind of understand, but you had to, and you look at Spotify and they learned the hard way too. They put Joe Rogan just behind, on Spotify and he lost a ton of audience and you just are. That's just what's going to happen. And they pivoted, and now you can get Joe everywhere, right? But you kind of have to like. That's why it's hard. It's hard for media buyers to buy it. It's hard for brands to completely understand it. And you got to have a good team like ours to tell the story and how it works the best way. There's all this attribution out there now, which is good and bad, right? I mean, it's not perfect. Technology never is, but. Mm-hmm. It's kind of scary in a way. Like if you hear Adam Carolla do a Home Depot ad, talking about paint and, redoing a studio with this color paint and he bought on HomeDepot.com and, you are listening to his podcast on one of your IP driven devices and you go to HomeDepot.com and buy it and they know. And it's wild. And that's why brands keep buying into the podcasting and the digital space. And that's why print and outdoor and radio and TV are dying, because they're not getting the attribution and the analytics that they want. And, that's the great thing about podcasting. You can deliver that on a digital basis, but you also get the beauty of what radio was originally, and that's the endorsement. Nothing better than Howard Stern back in the day saying, drink Snapple, and that built that brand. I remember it, being 15 years old, 14 years old, watching Howard on USA or whatever it was, and he'd be drinking Snapple and E-Network and all of that, right? Like, he was the innovator, and he's the guy that brought in the 360, because he was radio, then he was TV, and man, he changed everything in that world. And if you watch it, it just makes a lot of sense. So that's what we did.
No, it makes sense. And I feel bad I listen to all these super in the weeds, nerdy business podcasts, and they have these like B2B SaaS sponsors. And it's like, man, if you guys could make it so that I can only listen to the second half of the episode, if I do the B2B SaaS like demo or something like that, you'd be making like $500 a listener. It's a great, that's a great idea, by the way. And like, you're right, and that's companies now. We've launched a division called PodcastOne Pro, but we've been doing it for years, where companies are now, using our production services to make podcasts, not monetize with ads, but just to talk to their clients and have them on. Now you don't need to go to these huge conferences in Las Vegas or Austin, because you can reach more people by having a conversation with your clients just through your podcast. It's more efficient. So, but that's a really good idea. I like your idea. Maybe we'll talk more about that. All right. Sounds good. Well, that's kind of all I got for you today, Kit. If people want to hear more about PodcastOne, want to listen to your podcast, where's the best place to send them?
Yeah. Well, you can always go to podcastone.com. Our shows are everywhere. You can listen to them on any of your favorite platforms, YouTube and so forth. We're publicly traded just over a year now on the NASDAQ. You called it out. PODC is our ticker. You can follow our social media and stuff like that, but we're really a fun company. We believe in the space, and we love, working with all these other podcasting companies and so forth. But I really appreciate you having me on today, Will. I wish you all the best. It's people like you that really believe in the podcasting space that's made it as great as it is.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And for those of you still listening, please remember to subscribe and review. Thanks.
Thanks, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement, therefore, by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability